database file name, browse. And then go from there. Why do you suppose I say that's what we don't want to do? You see anything wrong with this picture?
Looking for a password?
No, no. What's wrong with this picture is my path is then going to be hard-coded to work on this machine and this machine only. All right? And therefore, if I were to do this, let's say this were the assignment, and I were to do it, and I were to upload it, then instructor me goes home and pulls out my laptop and downloads this and tries to grade it. It's not going to be able to find the database because I don't have a C users bu205 desktop school app data folder on my machine. All right? This is pointing to the exact physical path. So you don't want to do that. And I'll actually show you the result of this, and if you happen to do it wrong, I'll show you how to correct it. All right? But you don't want to go and say create new connection and then walk through the wizard's process. All right? So what do you want to do? Well, if you click on the drop-down, it knows, because that's in the app data folder, that that's a likely thing that you're going to want to create a connection to. So you can just click that, and click that. It'll ask us, do we want to save this connection? Yes, you do. All right. You do this the first time. Remember, we're going to save our connection string the first time. Assuming that you're only going to be using one database in an application, which for all the assignments that we're going to do in this class, that's valid. You only need to create the connection string the first time. Every other time, you simply use the connection string that you created initially. So I'm going to call this connection string school. All right. I click next. Now I'm actually into creating the SQL statement.
So in reality, is that the first time for each database that you're going to use?
First time for each database, yeah. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
Now, how would you access the multiple tables?
Well, we'll see that.
Okay, because that's another problem I ran into. I can access one.
Yeah, we'll see that. So, now we can go in and we can put in our SQL statement. All right? So I can go in and I'm going to specify a custom SQL statement. I'll just do something like select star from faculty ordered by FL name, FF name, I can test it out. All right, shows me that. And then I can click finish.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Sort of a tangent. When I was playing around with the SQL,
Mm-hmm.
it was throwing brackets around the file name and brackets around the column names.
Yeah. It puts brackets around it just to be safe. You need brackets if there's spaces somewhere in your column or table names. All right? So that's sort of the safe way to do it. If there's any character like that in there, like a space in there, you'll want to make sure that you put the brackets in there.
But they're optional if you don't.
Yeah, if you don't, they're not really needed. Right. Okay. Now, the last thing we have to do is we have to bind these together. We have to say that this data source is going to be displayed in this grid view. So I'll go there, click, choose data source, SQL data source, and there I go. Now when I run this, I should see the results of that SQL statement being displayed in the grid view.
The grid view automatically knows how many columns are coming in to create the
Yes.
correct size.
Normally, I just did select star. That's me being just a little bit lazy. Most of the time I would enumerate the columns and say, give me this, give me that, give me that.
You can do that with just a comma.
Yeah, just you put the different fields there. In fact, we can go and do that. We can go and alter that in a second here if you want to. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you what I mean about the connection string. Because we did it right. So we have our connection string. And we have our connection string in the web config file. So if we open up the web config file, we see that we have in here our connection string. There's a connection string section of this. The web config file is a XML file. All right. And you'll notice there's a section for connection strings, because you potentially could have multiple connection strings if you had multiple databases that you were accessing. There's my name that I gave it, connection string school. And this is the big connection string that attaches this to that particular access database. Now, this is a sign that we did it right. All right? That pipe, data directory pipe, vertical line, data directory, vertical line, indicates that whatever is defined as the data directory for this application, that's where it's going to find it. All right? The data directory is, what again, is the app data folder. So as long as we put it in the app data folder, it'll find it. So if you go and do this on your machine that has your name for the username and your folder structure and all that, I copy it down to my machine. It has all my usernames and all that on it. As long as the relative path of this stays the same and the database is in the app data folder, I'll be able to find it. If you did it wrong, instead of seeing app data there, you will see c:/user/mzeller/desktop/ etc., etc., etc. So if you see an actual physical path there that references a specific directory on your drive, you've done it wrong. All right? And how do you correct it? Well, you replace that with data directory. All right? So, there we have a page that has a grid view on it. All right. Now, there's other things we can do to this grid view. We can enable paging, enable sorting. By enabling sorting, it allows you to click on the heading and sort that way. I can edit the columns. Notice, for example, that FID, that really isn't very descriptive. All right, FL name, could probably figure it out, but you might want to be more descriptive than that. So we can actually go in and edit the columns, and we can go in and give them header text that is more understandable. Maybe we're going to get rid of the faculty ID. Maybe there's no real reason to show the faculty ID. All right. Actually, let's get rid of all of these except these two, or these three. There are Other properties we can configure, if you notice over here, for example, the page size is 10. That will show 10 of these at the same time. We only have a couple of faculty members in here, so we'll change the page size to 3. And then it will show 3 faculty members at the same time. All right. So now we can go and run it, and with these other options enabled, it's going to start to look more like a completed page. All right, there we have this. We can sort.
I have a question for
Yeah.
you with limiting that page size.
Uh-huh.
Is that for speed of loading in case there's a lot of visual?
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, it's a usability issue too. You know, how many do you want to show your users at the same time? You know, and you know, so you know, let's say for example, you know, how many? There's probably 100 and some full-time faculty here at LC. All right. Would you want to display a grid of 100 people and have someone have to scroll down? You could display 10 at a time, and like if you're looking for Zeller as well, you'd click towards the last page, and then you could find it quicker and all that. So there's usability issues as well. All right, let's do another one, and let's again this time put in our SQL. So let's do a second page. And we'll call this students. And let's go in and let's add a grid view again. And let's add a SQL data source. And configure. We don't click new connection. We don't click our database name, but we click our connection string. Now we can go in and we can access and write another SQL statement. And I'll just go in here and say something like select SL name, SF name, FID from student. Click finish. Bind these together. We can edit the appearance a little bit. Use auto format. Let's go and change the columns. Now, one thing I did or I didn't do in this case that I would not want to do in practice is I did not include the student ID, the primary key of the student table. You almost always want to include the key whether you're going to display it or not. All right. If you think about it, one of the things that we might want to do is we might want to link this page to a page that has the details of just one student. So for example, this might be a listing that shows all the students. We might want to have a page that shows the details about just one student. In that case, we need the student ID to bring the linkage between the two pages. So I didn't select the student ID just as an oversight. When we go back and play with the SQL statement, I'll be sure to go back and reselect the student ID.
Now, can you change what's displayed there from the ID number to
What?
the name? Is that what you're going to do? Faculty advisor?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Eventually we're going to do that. So now we go and run this, and we have our students with their faculty advisor. Now, as was noted, all right, this is showing the faculty advisor ID. All right, it doesn't show the faculty advisor name. Well, why is that? Well, you know, if you look at our tables, we did a good job following the normalization process. And therefore, there's a relationship between student and faculty. Student. There should be a relationship between student and faculty. All right, there's a relationship between student and faculty. And therefore, all we store in the student table is the key. Right? Whenever there's a one-to-many relationship, in fact, anytime we implement a relationship in a database, the only thing that we link tables together by are their key. That's the only field we put in there. So therefore, we don't put in, you know, the faculty member's first name and last name. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want to see the faculty member's first name and last name. All right? It's just that it's not. It'll be redundant to store it in the faculty table. So therefore, we need our SQL statement to combine the faculty table and the student table. And there's two ways that you can combine tables, that you can bring tables together in a relational database. Both of them are sort of generically known as joins, joining tables in a database. One of the methods uses the where clause, which we have not talked about yet, and which we'll talk about now. The other uses what's called the join statement. All right, let's look at the where clause, and let's look at the tables. Let's look at the tables, and let's look to see what the where clause does. The where clause serves two purposes. So let's say we have our two tables here. We have our student table. Primary key is student ID. Has a student first name, student last name, and among other fields it has a faculty ID number. The faculty table has a faculty ID, which is a primary key, faculty first name, faculty last name. Let's say, in addition to this information, there is a state. In other words, a state the student is from. Okay? I don't think we have that in our table, but so we'll pretend we do, and we'll talk about that because I want to talk about the where clause. One of the things the where clause does is it limits, it filters out what gets returned by the SQL statement. For example, if I were to say, select SF name, SL name from student, which students would it display? All of them, right? Remember, unless you otherwise qualify it, it will give you everyone. It'll give you everyone. Now, let's say if I didn't want every single student, if I only wanted students from Michigan, for example. All right, I want to filter out only students from Michigan. All right, I could achieve that with a where clause. All right, so I could say where state equals Michigan. The order of these clauses are important. So in other words, the from comes before the where. Let's see what other clauses we've done. The order by. If we were going to put an order by, it would come here. And what that will do is that will give us only students whose state equals Michigan. All right. Now, we could add conditions to this. For example, maybe we want students that are in Michigan or Ohio. Well, we could say state equals Michigan or state equals Ohio. Notice that state is not in quotes, whereas MI is in quotes. The column names are not in quotes. The values, like for example, we're actually looking for the letters OH in the state, all right, are in quotes. Let me go and write it this way so the camera gets it. So I can connect them with ORs. I could also connect them with ANDs. For example, I could say where state equals Ohio and city, another column we don't really have, but we can pretend, equals Columbus. So that would pick up people that were from Columbus, Ohio, but not from, there's other Columbuses, right? Columbus, Georgia? Is there a Columbus, Georgia? I don't know. We can pretend. All right. Because with an and, both the condition has to be true. With an or, either or can be true, and it will be selected. That's one use of the where clause, to filter out. Somewhat related to that is matching up. All right? So, let's say we want to show the faculty first name and faculty last name instead of the faculty ID. All right? Because what we have in our SQL statement right now is something like this. Well, you know, it shows that this person's faculty advisor is faculty advisor 4. This one's 3. This one's 2. What does that mean? Who knows who those people are? You know, in a college with 100 faculty members, that would be very hard to remember who all was what. All right. We can use the where clause to actually join those tables together. All right. And let's talk about how we would do that. First of all, our select statement will still include the names of all the columns we want, regardless of the table that it comes from. So in this case, we want the student first name, the student last name, the faculty first name, and the faculty last name. All right. So we can specify the columns that we want, regardless of the table that they come from. Then in, and the from clause will include both the tables that we want to use. All right? Now, we're not there yet. All right? Remember, I was going to say remember even though I don't think we've talked about it yet. That would make it hard to remember. Well, maybe you remember it from the 143 class. If you don't specify how to match up faculty and student, how does it know what faculty member belongs to what student? It doesn't. So what do you think it does? It matches every faculty member with every student. All right? In other words, you might think, gee, it should be obvious if I'm selecting between faculty and student that I want to use the faculty ID in the student table to pull up that one faculty person that is that person's advisor. Not so. If you don't specify how to match up those tables, it will match up everything in one table with everything in the other table. All right? That's known as a cross product. All right? It's an extension of the philosophy of if you don't specify, it does everything. All right? So, a warning sign. If you have a grid view that shows, 1,000 rows in it, and you only have 10 products in your database, you didn't join things together correctly. If ever your output has a lot more data than you expect to see, where you probably went wrong is in joining the tables together. You probably didn't join them together effectively. So, we can use the where clause to join these two tables together. Now, how does that work? Well, what we want to do is we want to match up the student to the faculty person using this faculty ID. In other words, if I gave you two sheets of paper, one that said, here's the students, student 1 is Joe, student 2 is Mary, student 1's faculty ID is 5, student 2's faculty advisor is 8. And I asked you, what's the name of Mary's faculty advisor? Well, you'd look and you'd see, well, it's a person who has a faculty ID of 8. You'd go look at that other sheet of paper and say, faculty advisor of 8. Okay, that's Zellers. So you would visually go and just match them up and say, this in this table matches to this in this table. That's effectively what we're going to do with the where clause. So, what we're going to say is where student dot FID equals faculty dot FID. That's how we match up faculty and student.
I've never seen the dot.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. Now, as was mentioned, these are columns and these are columns. Why do these columns look different than these columns? Well, a column's complete name is its table name and column name. Just like your complete name is your first name and last name. This is going to test me to see if I remember how many names I remember. All right. David, raise your hand. Ah. That's not going to work, right? If I said, David. It's going to be confusion, right? Do I mean David or do I mean David? All right? Because there's two people in the room that have a first name of David. So I would have to specify the full name. David Karpinski, David Klima, all right? In order to refer to a person. Now, if I were to say Ashley, there's only one Ashley.